It was only supposed to happen once, a single quiet moment between a man and a wild creature, brief, accidental, the kind of thing you tell yourself means nothing, but some moments, no matter how small they seem, have a way of changing everything that comes after. The evening had settled in the way late summer evenings do in the rural South, slowly, without announcement, the light going gold and then amber and then gone, the kind of quiet that city people pay to find and country people take for granted. He had been sitting on his back porch the way he often did after supper, coffee cooling in his hand, watching the tree line the way old habits make you do. Not looking for anything in particular, just watching. That's when he saw the movement, low to the ground, deliberate. Barely a suggestion of motion at the far edge of where the grass met the woods. He leaned forward without thinking, the way a person does when something catches the eye that the brain hasn't quite named yet. A stray, maybe, a neighbor's dog. It wouldn't have been the first time an animal had wandered up from the creek bed behind his property, but then it stopped, and it turned. The ears gave it away first, tall, tufted at the tips, set wide on a broad, angular head. Then the eyes caught what was left of the evening light, and for just a moment they seemed to hold it, gold and unblinking and ancient. He had lived on this land for over 2 decades and he had never seen one this close. A bobcat, a wild bobcat, standing not 40 feet from his porch, watching him with the kind of stillness that only wild things can manage, the kind that makes a human feel, suddenly and uncomfortably, like they are the one being observed. His first instinct was to go inside. Every reasonable voice in his head lined up to say the same thing: leave it alone. Wild animals don't belong near people. You don't feed them, you don't approach them, you don't encourage them. That's not cruelty, that's sense, that's respect even. A wild thing that loses its fear of humans doesn't usually end up better for it. But then he saw how she moved. She took one step forward and he caught the full shape of her, and something was off. She was thin, not the lean, coiled thinness of a healthy predator, but the drawn, careful thinness of an animal that hadn't eaten well in too long. The way she held herself was cautious in a way that went beyond instinct. She wasn't just wary, she was exhausted. There was a kind of quiet desperation in the way she stood at the edge of the trees, close enough to be seen but not yet close enough to commit, as if she was weighing something, calculating a risk she wasn't sure she could afford to take. He didn't make a decision so much as he found himself already moving. He went inside quietly, opened the refrigerator, and pulled out what he had, some leftover chicken, a bit of raw meat he hadn't gotten to yet. He put it in a shallow bowl, carried it out to the porch, and set it down at the edge of the steps. Then he backed up slowly, went back to his chair, and sat down. He didn't speak, didn't move. Just waited the way you have to wait when you've offered something to a wild thing, with patience, and without expectation. She didn't come right away. For a long time she stayed at the tree line, watching him with those gold eyes, reading something in the air that he couldn't perceive. He could see her processing, the way her nose worked, the faint shift of her weight from one side to the other, the ears rotating like small radars toward every sound the night produced. She was weighing him, not his kindness or his intention. Animals don't work in those terms. She was weighing his stillness, his predictability, whether the distance between them was safe enough, and whether whatever was in that bowl was worth the risk of crossing it. Minutes passed. He didn't move. Then, slowly, so slowly it was almost imperceptible at first, she began to close the distance, not in a straight line, but in the oblique, testing way of an animal that is afraid but hungrier than its fear. She circled wide, stopped, watched him again, circled closer. Every few feet she would pause and reassess, as if granting herself permission in stages. He could hear his own heartbeat. He kept his hands loose in his lap and his eyes soft, not staring, not looking away, just existing in the same space without pressure. She reached the bowl. She ate quickly, her eyes moving up to him between every bite, ready to vanish in an instant if anything changed, but nothing changed. He stayed still. She finished what was there, and then she lifted her head and looked at him one last time, a long, measuring look, and then she turned and slipped back into the trees without a sound. Just like that, she was gone. The porch felt emptier than it had before she came. He sat there in the dark for a while, listening to the creek and the crickets, turning the moment over in his mind. It was a strange feeling, not quite wonder, not quite satisfaction, something quieter than both. He told himself it was a one-time thing. He almost believed it. He didn't expect her back. That's the honest truth. He had told himself it was a single moment, a hungry animal, a quiet evening, a kindness that meant nothing beyond itself. He had gone to bed that night without much thought, the way a person does when they've convinced themselves a door is closed. But the next morning, when he stepped out onto the porch with his coffee, she was already there. Same spot, same stillness, sitting at the edge of the grass where the yard met the tree line, watching the porch the way she had watched him, patient, unhurried, like she had been there long enough to be certain he would come. He stopped in the doorway. She didn't run, just looked at him with those calm gold eyes, and waited. He went back inside and got the food. This time she came faster. Not fast. Nothing about her was ever careless, but faster. The wide circles were a little tighter, the pauses a little shorter. She still watched him between every bite, still kept one paw angled toward the tree line the way wild things do, never fully letting go of the exit. But something had shifted, even if only by degrees. The night before he had been an unknown. This morning he was a pattern. And wild animals, more than almost anything, understand patterns. It became a routine before he fully realized it was one. Every morning she appeared. Every morning he brought food out, set it at the edge of the steps, and returned to his chair. She would eat, watch him for a moment, and then disappear back into the woods. He learned not to speak, not to lean forward, not to change anything about the way he sat. The stillness was the agreement. The predictability was the trust. Days passed. Then a week. He began to notice small things. The way she lingered a few minutes longer each visit. The way her eyes, which had once tracked his every breath with alarm, now settled on him with something closer to quiet assessment. She wasn't afraid of him anymore. Not exactly. She was simply reading him, the way she probably read everything in her world, measuring what was safe and what wasn't. And then one morning, about 10 days in, he opened the back door and stopped cold. She was there, but she wasn't alone. Behind her, half hidden in the long grass at the yard's edge, small shapes moved, low and careful, eyes wide, every one of them watching him exactly the way their mother had on that very first evening. He didn't move, he didn't breathe, he just looked. 5 of them. He counted without meaning to, the way the mind reaches for something familiar when everything else feels suddenly extraordinary. 5 kittens tucked close together in the grass, their spots still sharp and new-looking, their eyes holding that wide, unfiltered attention that only the very young possess. They were small enough that the yard, which had always seemed modest to him, must have looked enormous from where they crouched. The mother stood between them and him, not tense, not coiled the way she would be if she sensed danger, but positioned, present. She wasn't warning him. She was simply placing herself where a mother places herself, in the space between what she loves and what she hasn't yet decided about. He set the food down at the edge of the steps and stepped back slowly, never once taking a sharp breath or making a sudden move. He returned to his chair, sat down, folded his hands in his lap, and then he did the only thing that made any sense in a moment like that. He waited. The mother ate first. She always ate first. Not out of selfishness, he understood now, but out of protocol. She was showing them something. Every move she made in his presence was a kind of instruction, a demonstration being performed for 5 small sets of eyes that were learning, in real time, how to read the world. She ate calmly. She did not run. And when she stepped back from the bowl and looked toward her kittens, the message was as clear as anything spoken aloud. One of them moved first. The boldest one, there's always a boldest one, crept forward through the grass with the exaggerated caution of a creature that hasn't yet learned to hide how curious it is. It stopped several feet short of the bowl, looked at him, looked at its mother, then looked at him again. He didn't move, didn't smile, didn't lean in, didn't do any of the things a human instinctively wants to do when something small and alive comes close. He just stayed still. And the kitten came forward. Then another followed. Then 2 more, nearly on top of each other. The 5th hung back near the tree line, watching, the cautious one, the thinker, the one that would take the longest to trust and probably hold it the deepest once it did. He recognized something in that one. He didn't say so out loud. The porch that had always been his alone felt different now. Not invaded, shared, like it had been quietly waiting for exactly this, and had simply never had the chance until now. The weeks that followed had a rhythm to them. Morning after morning they came. The kittens grew the way wild things grow, quickly, visibly, as if the world is always asking them to hurry up and become what they're meant to be. Their movements loosened. The wide-eyed caution softened into something closer to ease, and eventually, on the better mornings, into something that looked almost like play. They would tumble over each other in the grass, chase insects through the yard's edge, and then settle near the porch with the loose, boneless comfort of animals that feel safe where they are. The mother watched all of it. She had changed too, gradually, in the way real trust always changes things, without announcement or ceremony. The distance she kept had shortened, the measuring looks had grown quieter. She would sometimes sit near the steps after eating, not leaving right away, just present in the morning stillness the way a person sits on a porch when they have nowhere urgent to be. He never pushed it further than she offered. That, he understood by now, was the entire agreement. Then came the evening that stayed with him. He had gotten caught up inside, a phone call that ran long, something on the stove that needed attention, and by the time he stepped out onto the porch, the light was already fading. He had missed the usual time by nearly an hour. He half expected the yard to be empty. They were all there, all 6 of them, arranged in the grass with a patience that stopped him in the doorway. Not restless, not pacing, just waiting, the way a family waits for someone they are certain is coming. The mother looked up at him when the door opened, not startled, not urgent, just acknowledging. He's here. He came. He stood there for a moment longer than he needed to. There are things that happen in a life that don't fit neatly into words, moments that arrive quietly and settle somewhere deep, where language doesn't quite reach. This was one of them, not dramatic, not loud. Just a man standing on his porch in the early dark, looking at a wild creature who had, for reasons that belonged entirely to her, decided he was worthy of this. She had owed him nothing. She had come anyway, had brought the most important things in her world to the edge of his, and stood there calmly while they closed the distance between them. That kind of trust doesn't get asked for. It doesn't get earned in any way you can plan for. It only gets given. And some people, if they're still enough and patient enough and lucky enough, get to receive it.